Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media. Joining me today is Duane Bratt, who is a political science professor at Mount Royal University in Calgary. Duane, the election day, municipal election day is quickly approaching. We're not that far off. If you were a betting man right now, who would you say was going to win it?
Well, it looks like the field has narrowed, and for the last while, it has been Gondek versus Farkas. But there's been polls that have come out this week that have showed Jody Gondek increasing the lead. And so there's still 10 days to go, but it looks like Jody Gondek is now the front runner.
Okay, before we talk about Jody and Jeremy Farkas, let me ask about other candidates out there. It does seem to be splitting into a two-way race right now. Are you surprised that Jeff Davison has not had a stronger showing?
I do. I think back in the spring that Jeff Davison could have run a strong campaign. He could have emphasized the fact that with a council that had been hit by infighting, that he was a conciliator. He got an endorsement from Ward Sutherland, who is not running again, saying, of all the candidates, Jeff Davison is the one who can work best with other councillors. He could make the case that, he was the lead negotiator on the new arena, a very complicated deal that got done. And yet he hasn't been able to make that case. It hasn't broken through. He's been beset with some issues around his relationship with third-party advertisers. And I think Davison's campaign, I think he would say, if this is all said and done, that he could have performed a lot better.
Okay, let's look at the two front runners right now. What does Jody Gondek have to do in the next few days, week or so to win this race?
Well, it's interesting that so my friend Janet Brown did a poll for CBC, which showed Gondek in the lead, but then it did a larger study looking at what issues really Calgarians want to see. And there's a real divide. Those that want everything from a more vibrant art scene to a more livable city, to greater opportunity for youth, to affordable housing, to homelessness, they're gravitating to Gondek. Those that want to see lower property taxes, more money for the police, a more fiscally responsible city council, they're gravitating to Farkas. The problem that Farkas has is more people are on the more livable city side than on the keep property taxes low side. The other problem that Farkas has had is he's running against city council. He's appealing to people that want to blow the whole thing up and start over again.
Yeah.
Except Janet's research shows that there's actually support for city council. Surprisingly strong support for city council, including Naheed Nenshi. And so if Gondek is viewed as Nenshi 2.0, which Farkas has been trying to frame her as, that actually helps her. And so you get that sort of interesting dynamic. We're also seeing the repercussions of two other elements. One is a vote on vaccine mandates. City council passed measures to require city employees to be fully vaccinated or submit negative rapid testing. The only no vote was Jeremy Farkas. And I think that is hurting him on an issue that 80% of Calgarians support. The other is the relationship with Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney is not popular. Jason Kenney has the lowest approval rating of any provincial premier in the country. And people are connecting Kenney to Farkas just as they were connecting Kenney to Aaron O'Toole. And I think that has hurt Jeremy Farkas's campaign as well. He has a very enthusiastic floor of supporters, Farkas does.
Yeah.
The problem he had was how to build upon that. So he needed a strong campaign from Jeff Davison. He needed some of the non-council people like a Jan Demery or Brad Field to make headway, and they haven't. And because it's a two-person race as opposed to a 3, 4, or 5-person race, that has hurt Farkas.
Let's you mentioned the mayor, the head Nenshi. Do you think he will come out in support of Jody Gondek?
So far, he hasn't. But you look at some of his campaign team, including Gondek's campaign manager, Stephen Carter, they all worked at various times for Naheed Nenshi. You look at her party platform, it really does resemble a lot of Nenshi. So he hasn't come out publicly supporting it. I think on principle, he is trying to stay out of it, but we know he has huge animosity to Farkas, and Farkas has huge animosity to Nenshi. I think Naheed is waiting this out. But if you asked him privately, I'm sure he would rather see a Jody Gondek as mayor than a Jeremy Farkas.
I'm wondering, Duane, how quote unquote nasty do you think it's going to get in the next week or so here? Already we are seeing a lot of, you mentioned Jason Kenney. We're seeing a lot of connections through social media of people bringing up Kenney and Farkas, that relationship. We're seeing Farkas here just yesterday talking about Jody Gondek and the influence of unions. How
Yeah.
nasty is this going to get?
So I thought yesterday's forum hosted by the Calgary Chamber of Commerce was quite nasty. You had Jeff Davison describing Gondek as extreme left and Farkas as extreme right, not left and right, extreme left, extreme right, and that he was the only one in the center. You had Jeremy Farkas refer to union bosses, that she would be in the pocket of union bosses and would be giving firefighters and police and public service workers huge raises because she was in their pocket. And the response was, well, look at who is donating to Jeremy Farkas. Look at the event that was hosted by Preston Manning and Jim Gray and Ron Gitter at the Petroleum Club. Three white men in their 80s, saying Farkas is the future. So there has been some of that, but we've also seen some pretty vicious council races. And I think because it's an open mayor seat, we haven't been paying much attention to the other 14 ward races, but over half of them are going to be brand new. And there's some really interesting storylines in there. Joe Maglioka, who got tied up into a series of expense scandals, could he get reelected? You look at a man like Craig Chandler, who has a notorious history in politics. Could he be elected? And how the sitting councillor in that area, who's not running again, Shane Keating, actually sent a legal cease and desist order aimed at Chandler. So there's some really interesting ward races going on as well, but we don't have the sort of polling data at the ward level as we do at the city level because it's simply too hard to do.
The other thing too, it's interesting you bring that up because I was telling a couple of people the other day about how there's so many questions on this ballot.
Yeah, and what is often happening, and we're seeing stories coming out of the advanced polls, is people missing the fluoridation plebiscite question because it starts with the mayor, then goes to the council, then goes to trustees, and at the very bottom, as opposed to on a separate page, you've got the fluoridation question, and people are skipping that over because there's 27 mayors' names, and many of the wards have 10 or 11 people, and vice versa. I will say on the tough stuff at the ward level, I hosted a Ward 8 all candidates forum. And 7 of the candidates were there, including some of the perceived front runners like Courtney Walcott and Gary Bobrovitz and Cornelia Wiebe. And it was a very well-respected educational forum. So there is choice there. And so I think that's good for citizens.
Okay, so fluoride, equalization payments, Alberta Senator, daylight savings time, anything else? Am I
No,
missing?
so you're going to be given two ballots. So ballot one, I just described, mayor, council, trustees, and then fluoridation. Then you're going to get a second ballot, and this is the provincial ballot. And that will have the equalization referendum,
Yeah.
the daylight savings time referendum, and the Senate election. So let's just talk about each of those three questions. Equalization was a major plank of the Kenney government and the UCP for years. He was talking about that 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And in fact, Albertans have periodically complained about equalization, usually when the Liberals are in office federally, less so when the Conservatives are there. Then it was put in the UCP party platform. Then we saw the creation of the Fair Deal panel, and that emphasized the equalization referendum. Then there were a whole series of speeches and press conferences. But over the last 2 months, you have not heard very much from the provincial government talking about equalization. And I think it's because Kenney has realized that he is so unpopular that if he comes out campaigning on behalf of equalization, it may even cause them to lose that referendum.
Yeah.
The other danger is they're asking for the Constitution to be amended. And they're using arguments from the Quebec secession case, which said if a province has a clear question and a clear majority, it will compel the federal government and the other provinces to negotiate. They have a very clear question. Should it be removed from the Constitution? But what's a clear majority? Is that 80%? Is that 75%? I don't think it's simply 50+1. So Kenney has to win this referendum by a lot, and we'll have to see how that goes.
Okay.
Then we have the daylight savings time one.
Yeah.
This is also interesting because people hate changing the clocks.
Yeah.
My wife
Tell me
complains about this every year. But the problem is we would be going to permanent daylight savings time as opposed to permanent standard time. This would mean the sun would be coming up really early in the summer, but in the winter we wouldn't see daylight until 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And so now there's people talking that that's not the question they want, but it's a yes or no on daylight savings time. So you have advocates who criticized changing the clocks who are now saying that's better than permanent daylight savings time. But unlike the equalization referendum, which was very partisan, time zone changes are not. The NDP introduced this, but backed away. The UCP is producing this. So it's not a partisan issue, but it'll be interesting to see what we're stuck with.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the last part of that is the Senate. Do you think anybody really cares about that?
There is a history and tradition in this province of really caring about elected senators, particularly through the old Reform Party days, the Wild Rose Alliance days, up into the United Conservative Party days. And it's based on the idea, would you rather have a senator elected or appointed? And most people, when they hear that, go, well, absolutely, they should be elected. But if you ask tougher questions, you go down that thread, then you realize that it's a lot more complicated than simply elected or appointed. For example, just because you win the election doesn't mean you'll be appointed to the Senate. It's advisory to the Prime Minister. And no Liberal Prime Minister, whether it was Jean Chrétien or Paul Martin or Justin Trudeau, has appointed an Alberta senator who won a Senate election.
Yeah.
Karen Sorensen, the former mayor of Banff, was appointed in the summer without even waiting for this election. Brian Mulroney appointed a senator. Stephen Harper appointed senators. But so if Erin O'Toole had won the federal election a couple of weeks ago, maybe this would matter more. The other is we have municipal elections every 4 years. We have federal elections roughly every 4 years, sometimes sooner. We have provincial elections every 4 years. Senate elections They come and they go. Sometimes we have them, sometimes we don't. This will be the first one in about 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
So that doesn't sound very regularized to me. And what makes a person democratically accountable isn't just getting elected, it's getting reelected and going back to the voters every 4 years.
Yeah.
That's not the place here. When you're appointed until you're 75. So if you're 40 and you win this election and you get appointed, you could be there for 35 years and never face another election. And for all of these reasons, the only parties that are fielding candidates are the Conservative Party of Canada and the People's Party of Canada. There's a handful of independents, but the Liberals are boycotting it. The NDP are boycotting it. They don't boycott a federal election. They don't boycott a provincial election, but that shows the lack of seriousness with this. And in fact, there's two candidates. Jet Thunder, is running, to create the Senate as a Thunderdome. He's a joke candidate. Duncan Kenny, who runs Press Progress, who is a leftist, is basically running on the illegitimacy of the campaign. Vote for Kenny, not for Kenny. So the fact that you've actually got candidates running as a joke shows the lack of seriousness with this Senate election. And we know from previous years, the number of people who will vote, let's say for mayor, it dramatically drops when it comes to Senate. They either don't fill it out or they write in candidates like Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. There's even a movement to write in Jason Kenney, saying if Jason Kenney really wants an elected Senate, maybe write him in and then Justin Trudeau could appoint him to the Senate.
Well, it's going to be an interesting Monday, October 18th. And I'm just hoping with all those lists of things to check off on that it doesn't cause a bit of chaos at the polls with a lot of people backing up and lineups and stuff like that. But we'll see, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Super. Thanks, Duane, for joining us again.
Okay. You're welcome, Mario.
All right, that was Duane Bratt, a political science professor at Mount Royal University in Calgary. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media. Thanks for joining us.